There's so much hype about EVs, but everyone's forgetting one important thing. The average American can't even afford one. Despite that, the Biden administration is actively working to impose EVs on all Americans. Today, I'll show you the current demographics of Americans, so you can see why EVs are unachievable for many. I'll also share how Biden's plans will impact not just Americans consumers like yourself, but also car makers too. And stay tuned to see why Toyota may go out of business, and how GM and Ford will soon overtake Tesla. Everyone knows the price of gasoline has gone up, but many don't realize the real pain. It's like boiling a frog or a lobster. When you apply more heat, just a little at a time, it's hard to know you're stewing. Well, it's the same thing with gas prices. If you want to see how much gas prices have jumped, just rewind. You'll see that gas has jumped almost 44%. That's not just more than inflation, it's simply crazy. That's why more consumers are looking into EVs than ever before. Last February, the average price for a new gasoline-powered car was $45,600, whereas the average cost of a new EV exceeded $60,000. Of course, it's possible to buy a used combustion engine car for much less than a lower-end EV. For example, in the Atlanta metro area, the most affordable used EV with the model year 2018 or newer was around $50,000, although most were well over $60,000. Yet there were literally hundreds of used gasoline-powered vehicles for sale for less than $20,000. So how rich or poor are Americans today? How many Americans can afford an EV? Well, it used to be that America was made up mostly of the middle class. Some 61% of adults, to be exact. But believe it or not, in the last 50 years, the middle class has shrunk significantly down to 44%. Right now, only 18% of U.S. households are considered upper class, meaning that they earn more than $156,000 annually. Obviously, they're in the best position to opt for an EV if they want. And right now, the U.S. median household income is $67,000. Some 20% of American households are in the $25,000 to $50,000 income bracket. You have 18% of American households making less than $25,000 a year. As a point of reference, the poverty line for a family of four right now is a bit less than $27,000. In case you didn't catch that, that's 38% of American households that earn less than $52,000 and are considered lower class. Assuming there are 2.6 people in the average household, they're barely getting by. So do you really think that 38% of U.S. households can afford an EV? Obviously not. The middle class might be in a better position to opt for an EV. Some 44% of U.S. households are considered middle class. But the income range for the middle class is far and wide. We're talking a household income range between $52,000 and $150,000. So you can see it's widespread. And those on the lower end of the income range most likely can't afford an EV. Right now, the top two most popular EVs to date are the Tesla Y SUV and the Tesla Model 3 sedan. So how much will they set you back? The Tesla Model Y has a starting price of $65,900. The Tesla Model 3 has a starting price of nearly $45,000. Why are EVs so expensive to buy compared to your average gasoline-powered vehicle? Well, there are many reasons. For one, there's the sheer cost of research it takes to develop and manufacture an EV. EVs have different systems, and there are many different types of EVs. Really, developing an EV is almost like starting from scratch every time. True, gasoline-powered cars are updated every year, but they're rarely completely re-envisioned. Plus, the batteries inside EVs aren't cheap by any means. EVs run on lithium-ion batteries. An electric vehicle battery costs way more in materials and labor compared to conventional batteries for a gasoline-powered car. It's true that lithium batteries aren't as expensive as they were back in a Nissan Leaf and Chevy Volt were first introduced, but they aren't cheap today either. Also, EV chargers add to the cost of your EV purchase price. Having a level 2 charger installed in your house is a happy medium between level 1 charging at home and a level 3 charge at a public charging station. But a level 2 charger alone will set you back around $2,000. You need to factor that into your overall EV price. If you're set on getting an EV, don't forget to estimate your charging costs. In other words, your electricity bill. Right now, the national average electricity is about 14 cents per kilowatt. But in many states across the country, electricity prices are much higher. For example, in New England, the average cost of electricity is 24.5 cents per kilowatt. And in the largest state by population, California, the average cost is a whopping 26.71 cents per kilowatt. But just imagine, say, if even half of all Americans started driving EVs. Reality is, the uptick in electricity demand and consumption will drive up the cost of electricity even further. We're back to Economics 101, supply versus demand. We could compare current EV charging prices to current gasoline prices. But you have to remember that in the past few months of this year, gas prices have been at an all-time historic high. This last May, the average retail price of gas gas was $4.54. Yet 2 years ago, the average price of gasoline was $1.96. Many experts believe that if Biden were to embrace pro-energy reforms, energy prices could fall to Trump-era levels. Speaking of President Biden, he has big plans for EVs, but for many Americans, this won't be a good thing. Here's what I mean. A couple of months ago, Biden hosted a virtual major economics forum on energy and climate. This was actually the third time he held a meeting like this since his presidency began. At the forum, representatives from more than 20 governments worldwide discussed urgent food security and energy concerns. They also discussed their commitments and pledges to battling the global issue of climate change. Some governments pledged to decarbonize ocean-based shipping. Others pledged to increase fertilizer efficiency and alternatives, while others pledged to reduce methane emissions. Yet one common pledge kept coming on: put more zero-emission vehicles on the road. And that's where Biden's big plans come in. Actually, dramatically increasing the number of zero-emissions vehicles, or ZEVs for short, on America's roadway had been in Biden's books for years. Earlier this year, Biden announced his administration's target to have half of all new light-duty vehicles sold in 2030 to be ZEVs. This would include fuel cell electric, battery electric, and plug-in hybrid vehicles. Anyway, at the Major Economics Forum in June, Biden once again reiterated his plans to impose far-reaching regulations that would basically force car companies to sell more EVs and other clean green machines. Some of these regulations have already been put in place, while others will roll out in the near future. China and Europe have already been enforcing regulations to heavily promote EVs, and with Biden's new commitment, the world's three largest car makers are moving away from gasoline cars at a faster pace than anyone predicted only a few years ago. That's not to say that this will be an easy policy to carry out here in the U.S. In reality, it's quite an ambitious project. The Biden administration wants to invest billions of dollars to build charging stations for EVs and to lower the EV costs. But last year, the bipartisan infrastructure bill in the Senate only authorized $7.5 billion for chargers. That may sound like a large authorization, but that amount was only half of Biden's original request. And they're not even talking about where this electricity to run these chargers is going to come from. No one is building green power stations yet at any mass production level. Now, with climate change at its worst, you'd think a major U.S. EV announcement like that would spell out good news for everyone. But your average American family, this is anything but good news. Here's the thing about Biden's new policy. Once it's fully enforced, manufacturers will have no choice but to produce zero-emissions vehicles. We can all expect higher costs to buy and own a car. As it is, EVs are already expensive enough for the average American. At the high end of the EV scale, we got cars like Tesla Model S that starts at more than $80,000. And at the lower end are cars like Chevy Bolt, which start at $31,000. Even though it's one of the cheapest EVs you can find in the market, it's still got a price tag that's almost 10 grand more than a larger gasoline-powered sedan like the Chevy Malibu. Now, it's true. There are ways to lower the overall price of a new EV. For example, a federal tax credit can lower the sticker price to as much as $7,500. These credits are available for the sales of new EVs. You have to meet the income eligibility requirements in order to qualify for the rebate. Biden's plan for EVs spells out good news for some car companies, bad news for others. Take Tesla, for example. Tesla makes up more than 2/3 of the battery-powered cars sold here in the U.S. And Biden's announcement to force manufacturers to produce ZEVs will increase Tesla's sales. Did you know that this isn't the first time Tesla can be thankful to the U.S. government? Back in January 2010, the Obama administration granted Tesla a jaw-dropping $465 million loan to help them develop and manufacture the Model S sedan. Peter Rawlinson, former chief engineer at Tesla and now chief executive of Lucid, said that without the loan, Tesla probably wouldn't exist today. He even added that actually the U.S. government made Tesla the success it is today. But then there's Toyota. Toyota Motor is the world's largest automaker. Yet, despite that, they've only recently joined the battery electric race here in the U.S. Compared to some European and Chinese EV regulations, Biden's plans have been criticized by environmentalists as being too modest. By 2030, half the vehicles sold in the U.S. are still expected to be powered by gas or diesel. Yet, despite that, the ban on selling new gasoline-powered vehicles is fast approaching. And with so little marbles in the battery electric game, some critics believe Biden's new regulations will spell doom for Toyota. The big question is, will Toyota be able to catch up in time? Right now, the average American keeps his combustion engine car for 12 years, so we're talking a bit over a decade. So Toyota can still bet on their gasoline-powered cars having gas stations around for many years in the future. Yet, there still is pressure on the company to create and release EVs faster. Toyota also doesn't have the luxury of an almost $500 million loan from the government to help them. Even if Toyota were to start pumping out the BEVs en masse, remember, just because companies make EVs does not guarantee that many people will buy them. If you want to know how big Tesla is, look at the number. This year, between January and March, about 75% of EVs sold were Teslas. They're the market leader. Of Tesla's total sales, the Model Y SUV and the Model 3 sedan made up a whopping 68%. But experts are saying that Tesla's rear view mirror is getting crowded because other brands are creeping up on them. Last year, in the first quarter, Americans bought 18 different EV models. But this year, in quarter one, Americans bought 32 different EV models. And analysts predict that number will increase to at least 50 by the end of the year. So, who's Tesla's biggest competitor? Well, hot on their tail, taking the spot of third best-selling EV of 2022 so far is the Mustang Mach-E. Did you know that in the annual Car Wars series, the Bank of America conducted a study, and it predicted that GM and Ford will overtake Tesla in the EV market by 2025. That's less than 3 years away. According to the study, Tesla's current market share could drop to close to 70 to 75%, all the way down to 11% in the next 3 years. That's a nosedive. Ford and GM are actually expected to approach 15% thanks to their new EV models. Now, seeing that Tesla's absolutely dominating the EV market today, it can be difficult for us to imagine them dropping off to such a position. But experts believe this is a real possibility. The reason why is because Elon Musk is introducing products at a rate that's just too slow, and Tesla's product portfolio isn't large enough to compete in an all-oncoming competition. GM announced plans to spend a massive $35 billion on EVs and autonomous vehicles by 2025. They expect to be the leading EV sellers in the U.S. by 2025 with an estimated 400,000 vehicles sold. Ford announced plans to spend an even larger $50 billion on electrification by 2026. They expect to take the second spot in EV sales by 2025. Right now, Honda doesn't sell a single fully electric vehicle in the U.S. But recently, Honda said they're officially breaking into the battery electric market. Not one, not two, but 30 electric vehicles globally by 2030. And 20 will be for the U.S. market. This means more competition for Tesla, Rivian, Lucid, and many other car makers that are already in the BEV space. If I ask you to name the top EV company today, Honda wouldn't even be on your list. That's because at the moment, Honda only sells one electric vehicle, the Honda E, which is a subcompact car that's only sold in Japan and Europe. Actually, a lot of people criticize Honda for not embracing EV technology earlier, but they're not entirely correct. In the past, Honda, like Toyota, preferred to invest in hydrogen fuel cell vehicles as a clean, zero-emission option. So how successful or mainstream is hydrogen? Well, today, there are some 8,000 hydrogen-powered cars in the U.S., or between 30,000 to 35,000 on the road globally. Compare that to 10 million plus fully electric EVs already on the road worldwide. So you can see where the money is. Analysis expect an additional 2 million more EVs to be added this year alone. But the numbers aren't the only things working against hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. Hydrogen fuel cell vehicles first started in 1966 with GM's Electrovan. Yet, despite more than half a century of development, hydrogen fuel cell cars are still expensive to produce. You can only find them in a few countries or regions that have built hydrogen fueling stations. Part of the reason for low hydrogen sales in America is because of the lack of infrastructure network. Unless you live in California, you pretty much can't drive a hydrogen car. That's because California is currently the only state in the U.S. with a hydrogen fueling network. Once you leave the state, you're stuck. But what about battery electric vehicles? In the 12 years that we've had the modern electric vehicle, 1.3 million battery electric and plug-in hybrid vehicles have been sold here in the U.S. You can see it's quite a stark difference. Honda's always tried their best to stay true to their climate-forward slogan, Blue Skies for our children. But right now, they realize the best option for Blue Skies is to embrace fully electric cars. And now that the combustion engine ban will be happening in the States and in many other countries, you can see why fully electric vehicles have become critical for Honda. Did you know that Honda pledged $40 billion towards electrification and software technologies over the next 10 years? But remember, technically, electrification doesn't mean they'll make all their cars battery electric. Rather, it means all vehicles will have an electric motor of some sort somewhere in the drivetrain. Most likely Honda will be investing a large chunk of their $40 billion in conventional hybrid vehicles and plug-in hybrid models as well. The recent $40 billion pledge and plan to roll out 30 unique electric vehicles globally equates to about 2 million cars. Of these 30 future EVs, 2 will be electric sports vehicles. One is expected to succeed the Acura NSX that recently departed the market. The bulk of these new EVs will mainly be crossovers, which makes a lot of sense, given how popular crossovers are in America. Did you know that Honda has already sunk $343 million into developing their own line of solid-state batteries? And they plan to bring these batteries to their new BEVs in the second half of the decade. For now, though, they will be relying on lithium-ion batteries to power their upcoming EVs. Now, Honda didn't specify the actual underlying technologies for all these EVs, but Honda did note they'll expand the use of the Honda E architecture that they use in their current Hondas. Honda also shifting their business model. They plan to focus on hardware and software both. Right now, their core business is selling non-recurring hardware, which is pretty much car units, but they'll shift into offering after-sales services from software-based features. Take Take, for example, safety and navigation features. Today, you get most of these features as a part of the car. There's no extra cost. But with Honda's new plan, you'll pay for these features probably monthly or yearly. But Honda isn't the only automaker with this idea. Pretty much every other automaker you can think of is exploring this concept. You can think of it like a monthly car subscription service for add-on features. These fees will be to support things like content, services, and upgrades. Take GM, for example. They believe it'll generate $25 billion in revenue annually by 2030, purely on software and subscription services alone. That's not even including revenue from actual sales of cars themselves. Just look at your smartphone. In the past, we just bought a mobile phone, you'd only pay for cellular service. But today, we have 1 million apps on our phones, each operating different services. Many of these apps offer optional services for a monthly subscription fee. So now all you need is a smartphone to manage your home security system, operate your robot vacuum and track your weight and diet progress, and so forth. This is how the smartphone became more than just telephone hardware. And that's exactly how car makers are viewing cars. It's no longer about selling one car, which is just hardware. Cars are now computers of their own. And this is just the beginning of many services we'll be able to do right from our car's touchscreen. Stellantis believes software and subscription services will allow car companies to enjoy the type of operating margins closer to that of high-tech corporations. For example, Stellantis is exploring the possibility of offering services through tech platforms they're launching in 2024. Right now, they've dubbed it STLA Brain, STLA Smart Cockpit, and STLA Auto Drive. That's why Honda's taking this course the long term. To reach that goal, first, Honda will launch smaller-scale EVs in Japan, like the Key class. These are basically mini cars. While they aren't very popular in the US, mini cars are massively popular in Japan. The first new EV released in Japan will be a mini EV for commercial use, most likely a Key van. Price? Just around 1 million Japanese yen, which is around $8,000 US dollars. After the Key minivan, a variety of other models for personal use should follow, likely including mini SUVs. In China, Honda will introduce 10 new EV models by 2027. That's just 5 years from now. It's very interesting because not many people know this, but China is by far the world's leading EV market today. So it's a ripe market and huge opportunity for Honda. These 10 new models will be built at dedicated Honda plants in Guangzhou and Wuhan. Another interesting thing is that Honda's press release didn't even mention the European market. Given the population of China, I guess they're going for the big fish. So here's the big thing. Right now, Honda and GM plan to work together to develop a series of affordable EVs based on a new global platform. The purpose of this joint platform is to beat Tesla. Basically, in this joint venture, they'll use GM's next-generation Ultium battery technology, and they want to offer flexible battery architecture, outstanding power, range, and performance. From luxury and performance cars to daily commutes, SUVs, and pickups, the goal of the Ultium platform is to power EVs of every type and at every single price point. Together, Honda and GM are expected to produce millions of lower-priced EVs starting 2027. These new cars will include compact crossover EVs, and they'll be sending some of these across the continents. In a recent statement, they said that they will share their best technology, design, and manufacturing strategies to deliver affordable and desirable EVs on a global scale. And that would especially include the key markets in North and South America and China. In a way, this is smart. Look, right now, EVs are expensive, and most consumers know this. That's why EVs made in the joint Honda-GM partnership are expected to be priced below $30,000. Aside from external factors that drive up prices, the goal is to return to the days when cars were affordable and mainstream. So far, no financial terms of the new partnership has been disclosed. But the car makers have said they will be discussing future EV battery technology collaboration and opportunities down the line. One of the goals of collaboration is to drive down the cost of electrification, improve performance, and drive sustainability. Now, whether these new EVs will be based on Honda's architecture or on GM's platform is yet to be decided. But the two companies have agreed to share the bill for manufacturing costs, and the cars will potentially be produced at either GM or Honda plants. GM made a bold statement. They want to sell more EVs in the U.S. than anyone else by the middle of the decade. But to do that, they'll need a large portfolio of vehicles, and so partnering with Honda will help them reach their goals as fast as possible. Actually, did you know that Honda and GM have been friends for years? Honda previously invested $750 million in GM's Cruise autonomous vehicle unit, and now Honda and GM are co-developing the Cruise Origin autonomous EV. The companies also have a joint venture to develop and produce hydrogen fuel cell systems. Plan to do this at a plant in Brownstone, Michigan. But that's not all. GM will be producing 2 EVs for Honda for the 2024 model year. Honda announced that one of these electric SUVs, called the Prologue, will be their first dedicated battery electric vehicle coming to the U.S. GM isn't the only large company that Honda's partnering with. Honda's also teaming up with tech giant Sony. They'll be creating a completely new brand together. In a joint statement, they said that their goal is to create this new EV company within the year. And this company will sell its first EV model by 2025. This new company is yet to be named. Some speculate it should be called Sonda or Honey or some other mashup, but we'll have to wait and see. Besides finding a marketable name, they also have to figure out the development, design, planning, and sales aspect of their brand. Honda will take on the responsibility for manufacturing the new EVs at Honda facilities, and Sony will most likely be responsible for building the platform for mobility services. At the helm, the chairman of CEO will be Yasuhide Mizuno, a longtime Honda executive. This is exciting because the pieces of the puzzle are starting to come together. 2 years ago, Sony first debuted a concept car at CES, the Consumer Electronics Show. This concept car conveyed the Vision S concept, which is an EV with a variety of sensors and other innovative technologies. At that time, Sony said this concept car was built to test autonomous vehicle technology. Then this year, Sony returned to CES with the Vision S O2 SUV concept. With this SUV, they announced that they would form a business this year to put the car into production. The Vision S O2 was presented as an all-wheel drive setup that output 536 horsepower. Pretty much that's all we know. The mid-size SUV will compete with the Chevrolet Equinox EV Polestar 3 and the Ford Mustang Mach-E. The new Honda Sony EV is expected to hit the market in 2025. With Honda's pledge to eventually be 100% electric, would it surprise you to hear what it means for their motorcycles? Look, Honda is a brand known for its motorcycles. It's the world's leader. Last year, they announced 4 electric motorcycles to debut in a few years. Last quarter, they released the CRF E2, their first production electric dirt bike with lithium-ion battery. They're not actually making the bike, though. Actually, they licensed to another company called Greener Power Sports. They have a kids version and an adults version. And then there's Streamo. This is Honda's newest micro-mobility venture to develop an electric scooter or e-scooter for urbanites. Most city dwellers are already familiar with the growing hype, and we can see more electric scooters passing by cover short distances across the city. Well, now Honda's in the game, so you can see how Honda as a whole is moving forward with electrification across all its businesses. In the battery EV field, there's a new kid on the block, yet many have yet to hear about this company. Some say they're Tesla copycats, but with lower prices and longer driving range. And get this, these EVs are sold without a battery. If you think that's odd, stay with me. The idea is that you just pay for a battery subscription and you can drive up to a station for a quick battery swap. No more plugging in your EV and a long wait time. Now, if you're an average American consumer, you probably haven't heard about NIO, and I don't blame you. The company isn't even 10 years old. NIO realized batteries add significant cost to an electric vehicle, and they wanted to compete with the big names in the traditional gasoline-powered market. So they brainstormed how to reduce EV battery costs, and here's what they came up with. Just remove the cost of the battery from the product completely. This would make their EVs more affordable, accessible, and reusable. Sounds like a no-brainer, only in hindsight, and it's really revolutionary. Now, NIO did have some home charging stations for their batteries, but very few homes in China actually had the needed infrastructure to support the installation of home charging points. Most Chinese EV consumers live in super large cities, high-rise condos. In other words, self-installation home charging stations weren't an attractive choice, let alone even an option. So NIO decided to establish a battery swapping station and network. They call it Battery as a Service, or BaaS for short. Basically, it's a battery subscription plan. Here's how it works. Consumers buy a NIO electric car nearly $11,000 cheaper than other EVs. The car is cheaper because it doesn't come with a battery inside. Instead, you pay for the NIO EV battery subscription plan to replace your batteries whenever needed. Imagine if you can save 11 grand on an EV and instead pay a nominal subscription fee, and you'd have to worry about battery repair costs. Wouldn't you take that offer? This is a new idea for many Americans, but NIO has been doing it for 2 years already. Under NIO's BaaS subscription plans, consumers pay just $12 monthly fee to lease a battery, and as part of this special subscription, they have access to free charging and swapping services too. As of last year, NIO had executed more than 2 million battery swaps, and almost 40% of their consumer base had converted over to the BaaS plan. But it gets better. The service is offered through a mobile-based solution that's connected to a network of battery swapping facilities, and the swapping process is completely automatic. Here's how it works. First, you drive your EV to the station. From there, it's serviced by a car lift system that replaces the batteries automatically. Every battery pack that's removed from a vehicle for electrical performance gets inspected by a cloud-based battery management system before it gets recharged for the next drive. If any problems get identified, the battery gets taken out of circulation and sent in for repairs. And battery swaps at these stations are fast. It takes an average of 3 to 5 minutes to replace the existing battery in the vehicle with a fully charged one. Compare that to an average of 75 minutes to fully charge at a supercharging station. Now it's more like pumping gas into a combustion engine car. Just how large are these swapping stations anyway? NIO swapping stations were as large as 3-hole parking spaces. Talk about taking a punch in a tiny footprint. The size of these stations makes them convenient to install in parking facilities and even in crowded public places. As of last year, NIO had installed 301 battery swapping stations across China, and by 2025, they plan to expand to 3,000 swapping stations globally. Did you know that these battery swaps are also cheaper than other battery alternatives for EVs? NIO's service offers 6 swaps a month for $12 monthly subscription plan. 6 swaps will get you around 1,500 miles of range, so that equates to about 10 cents per mile. Tesla superchargers, on the other hand, cost you a tad more than that, and if you have problems with the battery, you have to think about those repair costs too for the battery. To ensure that any new batteries can fit older cars, NIO standardized their battery sizes. That makes it possible for those batteries to become a replaceable module in a larger vehicle. As of last year, there were some 75,500 NIO EVs on the road. Analysts estimate that the Boss subscription service generated about $4.5 million in monthly recurring revenue. We're talking a whopping $54 million a year, and this revenue is only expected to increase as NIO expands its production. NIO was co-founded in China back in 2014 by 2 entrepreneurs named William Li and Li Hong Qin. As of now, they have no manufacturing factories here in the U.S. Their international business headquarters is located in Shanghai. But actually, NIO isn't limited to just China. They have offices in places like Beijing, Munich, Oxford, Oslo, and even San Jose, California. Some are creating the buzz that NIO is China's answer to Tesla. Believe it or not, China is actually a leading car manufacturing country. For years, China has been subsidizing EVs, and every year, EVs account for a large share of new registrations in China. So how did this company go from being a small startup to becoming China's answer to Tesla? As of this year, NIO has already produced over 100,000 cars in China, and that milestone did not go unnoticed by the global EV community. In fact, even Elon Musk tweeted out his congratulations to NIO for reaching that tough milestone of 100,000 units. That's not all. If you think 100,000 cars is a feat, well, listen to this. Just this past May, NIO announced that they had delivered almost 205,000 vehicles globally. In fact, NIO is already among the biggest car makers in the world in terms of market value. Right now, its market cap's around $34 billion. That puts them in a similar playing field with Hyundai, Kia, Volvo, Nissan, and Renault. How did NIO reach such high numbers in such a short period of time? Well, it has to do with their creative, outside-the-box thinkings. And NIO is expanding. First up, they're in Norway now. Norway was officially the first European market to become home to NIO's electric vehicles and unique charging infrastructure. This includes ES8 SUV and ET7 Salon models. And while they're not super popular or mainstream yet, they've received plenty of positive reviews. The first battery swap station in Norway opened this past January. The NIO stations are basically identical to the ones in China. Unlike the Chinese stations, they need less than 5 minutes to extract the depleted batteries from the EV and install a fresh pack that's been charged to 90%. The reason they don't charge to 100% is because charging to 90% lengthens the life of the battery cells. Each Norwegian station holds 13 battery packs that are kept in temperature-controlled conditions to keep everything optimal. You can imagine why that's important when you consider the frigid temperatures in Norway, especially their infamously long and cold winters. Norwegian NIO owners who opted to select the Boss subscription and not buy the battery pack will be able to use the swapping station for 2 free swaps each month or get the equivalent kilowatt hours of charge. Any additional swaps are available at an extra cost. Currently in Norway, NIO is charging €10 per swap plus an additional 20 euro cents per kilowatt hour. NIO's Boss service came to Norway only since past March. And get this, around 92% of Norwegians who bought a NIO opted for Boss. This has given NIO further proof of concept. And now NIO plans to expand across Europe. Currently, 20 more expansions are under construction. And by the end of this year, NIO plans to set up shop in Deutschland, Germany, Sweden, Denmark, and the Netherlands. But what about here in the U.S.? Well, NIO does have an office on American soil. It's located in San Jose, California, and it's not small. It's a 202,000 square foot corporate facility they have over there. Recently, Chinese media released some reports about a few eye-catching job announcements from NIO. Specifically, NIO is hiring professionals experienced in factory building in the United States. The company is also hiring a blueprint planner with experience in at least one U.S. factory project. So, does this mean that NIO will open a factory in the U.S.? If you ask me, I'd say it looks like it. If you consider the specific job opening, it's almost undeniable proof of NIO's current plans for an American factory. But as of right now, the company hasn't disclosed any details about this. Now, if you think building a factory in the U.S. might be straightforward, well, it's not as simple as that. But it'll be even more complex for NIO because of how they manufacture their cars. Analysts are wondering how exactly NIO would assemble their EVs when they build their factory here. Here's the thing. Currently, NIO doesn't manufacture any of its vehicles independently. Since 2016, they've been partnering with Jiang Wuai Automobile Group, or JAC for short. JAC is a state-owned automobile manufacturer. NIO pays JAC for each vehicle that JAC makes for them. All of these vehicles are produced in the NIO Advanced Manufacturing Base in the province of Anhui in China. If NIO does come to the U.S., it's unclear if it'll be managed independently by NIO or co-managed by NIO and JAC. And if JAC does end up getting involved, the involvement of a Chinese state-owned company would most likely catch the attention of U.S. regulators and politicians. But now, let's talk about another one of NIO's automotive innovations. A few weeks ago, NIO announced their brand new electric SUV, the ES7. And boy, this will be a tough competition for the Tesla Model Y. The ES7 is only the fourth vehicle for NIO today. This new SUV will cost anywhere around $70,000. But this isn't any old SUV. It's NIO's fastest SUV. It can hit 60 miles an hour in less than 4 seconds. On a full battery, the ES7 will be able to travel 301 miles, where the Tesla Model Y can travel 330 on a single full charge. So not a huge difference. But Tesla does beat the ES7 in the standard range department. Now, NIO does plan to offer an optional ultra-long-range battery pack. Reportedly, this will offer drivers a whopping 528 miles of driving range. Did you know that NIO aimed to make the ES7's cabin feel so comfy that it would be like your second living room? It comes with heated, ventilated, and even massaging front seats. Here's a feature the ES7 has, which the Tesla Model Y does not: bi-directional charging capability. That means your ES7 can actually share power with appliances and devices. Not only can the EV supply power to towed equipment, but you can also support vehicle-to-load discharging and camping mode to power outside devices too. If you're wondering when will the ES7 be released, well, last February, NIO said it unveiled the new SUV in April. But due to a rise in COVID cases, a mass lockdown was enforced throughout Shanghai, and that just happened to be where NIO's global headquarters is located. As a result, the debut was pushed to late May. But then there was another postponement. NIO announced they'd share details this summer. When NIO formed initially, the first car was the EP9 sports car. It wasn't a road legal car, but for track use only. Only 6 of these were sold to NIO investors for some 2.5 million British pounds each. It was an all-electric supercar that set the fastest lap times at a number of racetracks. In fact, in 2017, it was the world's fastest production electric car. NIO's first mass-produced car was the ES8. It was launched in 2018, and it was an all-electric SUV with a range of 311 miles. Considering how young the company is, they've come a long way already, and it'll be interesting to see how NIO enters the U.S. They say competition is good because it pushes all players to do more. So I feel it'll be a good thing for consumers if NIO enters the North American market soon. But now, you tell me. What do you think of the EV battery subscription plan? Do you think it's a better infrastructure than physical charging networks? Would you consider a NIO EV? And should Tesla be nervous? Please share by commenting below. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for your support.